I'm just waiting for the notification, ma'am.
Okay.
And yes, ma'am. Okay. And we are live. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to a very, very special edition of Off the Record, the People's Podcast. We have a great guest with us this afternoon, one who we are extremely humbled by your presence. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Yes,
Minister Ava Muhammad, first of all, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Brother Joshua.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
a pleasure to be on.
Praise be to Allah. Well, right now, the youth are looking for guidance and looking for a lot of answers. And I want them to know some guidance, but I also want them to know the person behind who's giving the guidance. So let's
Yes,
start
sir.
with, what advice would you give to the youth in this time period?
You've been provided with leadership. The reason there is so much dissatisfaction, in fact, dissatisfaction among the people of this country is at 100%. And we are taught in the Nation of Islam that it's a mathematical truth that dissatisfaction brings about a change, and the change is always in proportion to the degree of dissatisfaction. So, for example, if 30% of the people are dissatisfied, then you're going to have a 30% change. 100% of the people, not only here, but around the globe,
yes, ma'am,
are dissatisfied. Now, everyone's not dissatisfied for the same reason, but everyone is focused in on what the root of the problem is. And this has not happened in well over 6,000 years. And the root problem, as we're taught by Minister Farrakhan, is the absence of proper leadership. And what is proper leadership? Proper leadership is divinely guided leadership. Leadership that follows the law of God. Right now in the Nation of Islam, we are on study guide 16,
yes,
the
ma'am.
law of God, in Minister Farrakhan's revelatory course, Self-Improvement, the Basis for Community Development. It's interesting and it's significant that while there are debates going on right now, raging debates over what? Law, man-made law. What degree of murder is the cop to be charged with who tortured George Floyd to death?
Yes, ma'am.
What are the state's rights when it comes to COVID-19, and whether or not people should be ordered under house arrest, though it's called shelter in place?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
People are ordered to wear masks to keep out a virus that the so-called experts admit they don't understand. So since you don't understand what it is, so you're going to tell me that the only solution you have is for me to impede what God gave me, which is the ability to inhale and exhale? George Floyd is dead because his air supply was cut off.
Yes, ma'am.
He was tortured to death. The cop's knee was in his neck, but those who aided and abetted had him pinned down in the middle of his body, at his knees, from top to bottom. He was being pressed into the ground. And this cut off his air over a period of 9 minutes. Now, Allah gave us a body for a spirit to live in.
Yes, ma'am.
How much do we need air? How important is air?
Yes, ma'am.
You can go without food for 6 weeks. You can go without water for days. You cannot live without air for more than a few minutes. So we are people who breathe air. We live on the earth, but we require air to live.
Yes, ma'am.
And so the only solution that the children of our slave masters can offer us and their own people is to wrap a face mask and not be able to inhale and exhale, because you might inhale the virus or you might cough or sneeze and expel the virus. Well, from the time I grew up in the 50s, the last century. From the time I knew words, I was told, cover your mouth when you cough or sneeze.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to school, no problem. All right. Now, is this a behavioral control matter? Well, we'll table that for a minute and get back to the question of what should the youth do.
Okay. Thank you all for continuing to watch the People's Podcast as we wait on Minister Ava's Wi-Fi situation to come through. Okay, there you go. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yeah, because I was going to say my Wi-Fi looks like it's on max. I don't know what happened.
Yes,
where did I stop?
yes, ma'am. What should the youth do?
Oh, yes. Okay, your body has one head. You don't have two heads or three heads. You have one.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you have two kidneys, you have two legs, two arms, etc. You have a nose, a mouth. You have one head. And so we need to follow focused, singular leadership. It doesn't mean you give up your individuality and your identity. But while we worry about individuality, the Caucasian is telling us what to do every day. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep. Everything from the type of bathroom tissue we use to the designer labels that we plaster on ourselves.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. We need divinely guided leadership. This generation, your name, Joshua, Brother Joshua,
Yes, ma'am.
is oftentimes called the Joshua generation because that is the generation that went into the promised land. And we really are in a similar time now. We are poised to go for self. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad offered the singular best and only solution to the problem between Black and white. And it's for us to have separate state or territory of our own. Minister Farrakhan told Trump in 2017 at the Watergate Hall that we would take and that's really not much to ask. At 50, we could start with several of those, given that we built this country. And what we saw during the COVID-19 crisis, and we see the supreme wisdom in the Honorable Elijah Minister Farrakhan in directing forward specifically of a certain area. You could state, for example, and if you dominate the nation, you get 2 senators in the U.S. Congress, you in the man who have to have control, not just at the state level and not just at the federal level. You have to have control at the state and county level. This is where taxes are assessed. Decisions are made that truly affect our economic condition. But you saw, if you were following the news during the crisis, the
Okay, wait. I'm sorry, Sister Minister. They're saying your screen is frozen, ma'am. I apologize. Can you hear me, Sister Minister?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. They're saying your screen is frozen. Okay, I just want to make sure they can see you.
Oh,
And thank you all for
okay.
watching. Continue to watch People's Podcast. Okay, Are you okay now? Are you straight now?
Yeah, everything looked fine from my end. I'm sorry it's not going well. Uh, but I do want to, is it moving now? Is it back in motion?
No, no, ma'am. It's still okay. I'm looking right now.
Frozen?
Yes, ma'am. I think it's something.
Okay. I see you and myself. I
Yes,
don't know. I'm
okay.
moving on my end.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Yes, ma'am. We're right here with you.
Yeah. But anyway, if you remember, there came a time when several of the 50 states began shutting down activity to control the spread of the infection. And after a while, most of the states had done that. At a certain time, President Trump instructed the states to reopen because the closure was destroying the US economy. And Andrew Cuomo told him on behalf of the various governors, particularly in the Northeast corridor, that he said, let me remind you, you don't give orders to us to open or close. He said, the states created the federal government. The federal government didn't create the states. And I say that to say, for example, if we were the dominant population in a place like Georgia or Mississippi, we would have been making all of the decisions for ourselves in terms of health, education, and welfare. We would be able to say, no, you're not going to vaccinate me. You're not going to shoot a disease into my body that you came up with. We have a theology and an ideology that we follow for health. Okay. And so each state, as we speak, has the constitutional right to control its own finances, its own educational system, and its own welfare. And that's what the youth should be focused on. Make sure you have knowledge in some field of endeavor. Allah usually, he will not give you a desire to do something that you have no aptitude for, okay? He's a just God, he's a loving God. And so he matches up skills and desire. And if you quietly reflect on what is it that you love to do, that is also something your fellow citizens could benefit from. And that's your life purpose. Through prayer, through focus, find out your individual life purpose. And that's what you're going to bring to the building of a nation.
Beautiful. Praise be to Allah. And thank you all for continuing to watch the People's Podcast. Speaking of education, a lot of the sisters who are in sororities know that you're an AKA. What made you choose to become an AKA, and what college did you go to, ma'am?
I did not choose AKA, chosen for me.
Yes, ma'am.
My birth name is Ava Karen Atkinson, AKA.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
My dad, William Atkinson, was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Okay. My mother was Delta Sigma Theta, and we see who won out. Alpha Phi Alpha. Yes, and I went to an HBCU, thank Allah. Yes, I went to Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio. And Central State University and Wilberforce University, which was the site of the Underground Railroad, by the way, yes, are adjacent to one another. The campuses almost merge together. The best days of my life were spent at Central State University. And I recommend all Black young people, if you decide to go to college, go to an HBCU. My daughter Sherelle is a psychology major and an Arabic minor at Howard University. I wanted to go to Howard Law School. I submitted an application, they never answered me. I'm finding out 40 years later they're notoriously slow. Maybe one day they'll answer me. But meanwhile, they accepted my daughter, and she's on the dean's list. But there's no substitute, Brother Joshua, for being around your own people. And on HBCU campuses, the staff and the faculty and the administration are almost parental. They truly are concerned about your well-being and about your future. And so even though I went to Georgetown Law School in Washington, D.C., one of the best law schools in the country,
Yes, ma'am.
I would have preferred to go to Howard, okay, because there's that camaraderie, there's that brotherhood and sisterhood that instill in you a self-confidence like none other. I fortunately grew up in a Black community, a middle-class Black community in Columbus, Ohio. And so I grew up with an idealized love of a Black reality. And that's what drew me to the nation, was separation, is the desire, not out of hate for anybody, but out of love for self, wanting to be with my own people. And we're born with a genetic preference for the company of our own kind. It's the most natural thing in the world. You see it with birds and bees and ants and animals. They all flock together with their own species. That's who they live with. That's who they mate with. And then they may interact based on nature's structure to draw different things from each other to fulfill their needs. We're all part of a food chain. We're part of a life chain. And the human being is the apex, the top of that chain of life.
Praise be to Allah. Yes, ma'am. My sister Naima wants me to make sure I let you know that our mother went to Wilberforce University.
Yes, all right.
Yes, ma'am. And my next question for you is, how did your parents feel about you accepting the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad?
Well, by the time I came in the nation, my father had passed away. We lost him to lung cancer. And but my mother was very pleased. My mother loved Minister Farrakhan. My sisters, my brothers-in-law, my whole family loved Minister Farrakhan and the nation. The one of the main reasons they're not necessarily registered, that has more to do with the discipline requirements.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I understand. And thank you again for your transparency and honesty, Sister Minister Ava. My next question for you, ma'am, is,
Yes,
when did you first meet the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan?
It was in 1981. I was a young attorney in New York City after I graduated from Georgetown University, came to New York City, and in 1976 took and passed the New York bar. And I worked in law enforcement in my early years. I was in the Office of Enforcement, in the Inspector General's office of the Health and Hospital Corporations. And then ultimately, I became an assistant district attorney, a prosecutor in Queens, New York. And the amenities, the money, the whole nine of an education. And there's a lump just above my left breast, and they do a biopsy and they tell me I've got, not only do I have cancer, but it's advanced. And my mother had been diagnosed with it not too long before me. And I underwent all this chemotherapy treatment. And when that happens to you, you start looking for something more.
Yes, ma'am.
Than the material things in life. And I was in my late 20s, nowhere near ready to leave the earth. I was terrified.
Yes, ma'am.
My mother was still in Ohio. I was scared for her as well as myself. My father's death had devastated our family just a few years prior to that. And so it was a very dark time in my life, and I started seeking something. So I went back to the church, which had never satisfied me, because even growing up in the Methodist church, I never could handle the white Jesus
Mm.
up above the pulpit. I couldn't deal with what I later realized was spookism. Um, but you go to Sunday school, you do all those things. But the moment I got out of my parents' house and went to college, I was done with that.
Yes, sir.
And so I was never a religious. We had high morals, and we were trained to do right by people. But I was never some religious, pious type of individual. But I tried to go back to church. It did absolutely nothing for me. And one day I was on a subway train. I lived on the Upper West Side of New York, and I would go to Harlem, of course, because that's where the Black folks were.
Yes, ma'am.
And I was on my way up there, and I'm coming up out of the subway. This is in 81, I think it was, 1981. And I see this poster that said, "Truth crushed to the earth will rise again. Mr. Louis Farrakhan speaks."
Mm-hmm.
And so I came back and I told young attorneys that I was practicing law. Uh, Sister Barbara Muhammad, who's there in Atlanta
Yes,
right
ma'am.
now.
Yes, ma'am.
Brother Larry Muhammad, who became her husband, but he passed away, unfortunately, of a heart attack in the early 2000s. But they were together, seeing each other
Yes,
at
ma'am.
that time. And so the three of us were practicing law along with another brother. And I told them about it. Well, Brother Larry went to hear the minister. The rest of us didn't make it. But he brought me a book. He brought me several books.
Yes, ma'am.
Uh, and the one I read, it was not Message to the Black Man. It was a book called How to Eat to Live.
Mm.
And this was a Friday evening that the minister spoke. And over the weekend, I read volumes 1 and 2. And I had an appointment the following Monday with my oncologist, or a cancer specialist.
Yes, ma'am.
And I told him, I thanked him, and I said, I found someone else I'm going to see.
Mm.
And I never went back. Okay.
Mm.
And, got off meat, I grew up eating pork, but I went to law school with Jews. Okay. There's a lot of Jews at Georgetown. They didn't eat pork, and
Yes, ma'am.
they talked about how bad it was. So I left that alone. And I was never someone that was so in love with flesh food
Mm.
anyway. So I already was sort of shying away from pork, but when I read How to Eat to Live, that pork went on the side of death self. And red meat as well, because he said in capital letters, no meat is good for you. It's permitted, but it's not good for you.
Yes, ma'am.
And so the minister came back to New York shortly thereafter, and I went to hear him. I think it was at the School of Music and Arts, City Community College. And that too was on a Friday night. And all of us went, the young lawyers went to hear him, and we all just fell in love. There was not a thing he said that I disagreed with or didn't believe instantly.
Mm.
I was never one of those that struggled with any of our belief. And it was interesting because he didn't take acceptances.
Mm.
He
Mm.
called this young man up, and he put his hand on his shoulder, and he said, "This is my minister in New York, Linward X."
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And he said, they're meeting at the Harlem State Office building on Sundays. And so go there if you want to know more. And of course, we went right there Sunday, and we all stood up and accepted.
Crazy.
And the rest is history. Of course, Brother Linward is now Abdul Kareem Muhammad,
Yes, ma'am.
and he served for years as the East Coast representative. It was under Brother Kareem, that I met a young brother in his teens named Kevin, brother Kevin
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
X,
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
who
ma'am.
eventually became Abdul Hafiz
Praise
Muhammad.
God. Yes, ma'am.
And everybody that came up under Minister Kareem is like a hardcore soldier.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Because
ma'am.
there was no middle ground at number 7. Okay, in New York. No middle ground. You either with us or you're against us.
Praise be to
Okay.
Allah. Yes, ma'am. Okay, it's
And here we are.
beautiful. And thank you all for watching. You're getting so many comments, Sister Minister. Thank you all for showing. I see your comments. Thank you all for showing love. My next
Thank
question
you.
is,
Yeah.
when did, how important has your, because I'm in college now and I am encouraging
Praise
a lot
be
of
to
young
God.
people to go to college. How important
Yes,
has
sir.
your degree been in helping us build the nation and being able to help the Most High Mr. Farrakhan? How important has your education been?
Well, it's had a very powerful role.
Mm.
Because the thing about what college does for you is, number one, it gives you the opportunity on your own to complete something.
Yes, ma'am.
And one thing that's very important in life is the ability to see things through to the end. Slavery made us very insecure and unsure as a people. And oftentimes we will start something, and if a difficulty arises, we will abandon it.
Mm.
And so whether you do a 2 year, a year, whatever you do, and everybody doesn't need to go to a 4-year college. What everyone does need to do is make yourself proficient in something. Don't That's like a balloon around, and you're pulling knowledge out the air. And so you know a little this, little that, but you know anything
Yes, ma'am.
here. And that means you can win anything. We need every type of service that's imaginable. You can be or do anything you want. But what I liked about college, in addition to the interaction with young people of your own age, is the structure that it gives you. But the point is, you're doing what you choose to do. For the first time in life, your schedule. In high school, you're completely under someone's authority, and you're told this class starts at this time, and now you get to start to select classes. And the further you go, the more that is shifted from the institutions and the older generation to you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
University, went to law school. They could care.
And thank you all for continuing to watch the People's Podcast.
You're paying to be there, and we had one exam. You hear me?
I'm sorry, Sister Minister, your screen froze again on this.
Classes started in August. You didn't get a test until May. You have homework. Okay, you had reading assignments, but hey, you want to be a lawyer? Then we trust that you'll show up and do what you need to do. And so the process itself helped me for the nation, but then New York Post slandered. Yes, sir. I'll stop.
Yes, ma'am. No, people are saying they could. It's going in and out. Please, is there any way? Okay, right here. Okay.
Well, my Wi-Fi is showing.
Can you try to turn your Wi-Fi off and see if we can just go off of your
Okay, let me try that. I'll try that.
Please, and thank you, because I don't want to miss any of this. And it's a great history. And thank you very much, Sister Minister. Thank you all for watching as we get great information as well as great inspiration from our sister, Dr. Minister Ava Muhammad. Thank you, Sister Tracy. Thank you, Sister Aisha. Thank you, Sister Joy. Thank you all for watching. Shout out to Brother Dirts for always showing love. Thank you all for continuing to watch the People's Podcast. today. While we
Okay.
are, okay, you ready, ma'am?
Now I'm frozen. Let me see. I turned it off.
Yes, ma'am. Is that better?
It's the same for me. I wasn't experiencing any problem. How are the viewers
Yes, ma'am. It's
doing?
okay, we're looking at it now. It's better now, yes, ma'am.
It is? Okay, praise be to Allah.
Is it okay? Yes, ma'am. It's better. Okay, can you? Okay, you were saying that we were getting slandered.
Oh yeah. And as the minister prepared for the Million Man March, the New York Post came out in '94 in March with the headline Malcolm X widow pins murder on Farrakhan. And it was a big story saying that Dr. Betty Shabazz, in an interview on a local New York channel, had accused the minister of murdering her husband, Malcolm. Well, we watched the interview, and she did not say that. You know how the devil plays with words and he elicits responses. And you could see she's very uncomfortable with the whole interview, the way it was going. But that paper came out on a Saturday. We got called in to the National House executive staff, and the minister decided and the minister is not a person that sues. He's not into suing anybody.
Yes, ma'am.
But that time he said, I want a lawsuit. I want it filed Tuesday. Okay, this was Saturday night. It generally takes about 6 months to prepare a defamation lawsuit against a major publication. We prepared it in 2 days. Okay. And we filed a lawsuit against the New York Post for $4.4 billion. Some people made mockery of that. Now everybody's suing for billions of dollars now.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But anyway, we sued the New York Post, not Dr. Betty Shabazz. This upset the media tremendously. They interviewed us coming out of the 60 Center Street, which is the trial court. In New York, the trial court is called Supreme Court. Filed it Tuesday morning, came out with the legal team. They were there surrounding us with microphones. They were shocked that the minister hit them with a lawsuit. And the first question that I was asked as the lead attorney, it's a white woman, she said, why didn't you sue Betty Shabazz? I said, because Betty Shabazz is not at fault. You are. That's why. Okay. But those are the kind of instances where your training and your degree and your college and your law school comes into play. Having Dr. Abdul Alim Muhammad at the time when the minister was battling with the cancer and in the throes of death, is Dr. Abdul Alim Muhammad and the minister's daughter, Sister Fatima Muhammad, with a nursing degree and background. So that saved his life. Allah uses human beings. We're not spooky.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
When we need something built, we need men and women. When we need something to eat, somebody's got to plant seeds.
Yes, ma'am.
And then harvest the produce. Somebody's got to milk the cows. So somebody has to look at our Final Call newspaper. Those are people writing articles and columns, and then people distributing that newspaper. Everything requires people with knowledge and wisdom and understanding. And so whether or not college benefits us depends on how focused we are and what it is we want to do with it. As Minister Farrakhan has said, don't go just to go and incur debt and spend time there. Yes, but go get your paper and get out. And have a good time while you're there, but don't be a clown.
Yes, yes, man. Yeah. Praise be to Allah. And thank you all for continuing to watch the People's Podcast. And thank you, Sister Minister, as well. I also wanted to know, when did you go because you spoke with the minister fighting death, being very ill. When did you go from seeing the Most High Missiles Farrakhan as maybe a speaker or an activist to someone who was in fact divinely guided?
I have to say, I felt that way from the very beginning.
Mm, mm,
mm. I was blessed to be in the throes of death when I heard the minister. Everybody doesn't have that advantage.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Islam is harder to accept in white America when you're doing well. Follow me?
Yes, ma'am.
So I was in such a condition that it opened my heart and mind. And I knew, because I was so well educated, I knew that what the minister was bringing was not from the ordinary realm of knowledge of this world. I knew it because I had enough knowledge of this world to have something to compare it to.
Yes, ma'am. Praise be to Allah. And thank you all for continuing to watch the People's Podcast. My next question is, how did you receive the name Muhammad? What were the circumstances of that?
That was back in it was either 84 or 85. And it was the first time the minister gave a family giving of the names. It was a laborers meeting in Chicago, Illinois. And the minister, after speaking, he gave this impassioned lecture that day. And, the nation was growing and evolving rapidly. In the wake of the assault on the minister by the Jewish leadership, when Reverend, I'm trying to pull this stuff up in my mind, Reverend Jesse Jackson was running for president, and the Jews were attacking him, and he asked the minister for help. And of course, the minister sent the FOI for security. He also spoke out on Reverend Jackson's behalf, and this brought all the heat down on him and us. But naturally, that caused us to rise in popularity and recognition by the Black community. They loved it.
Yes, ma'am.
And so during that time, so the minister at a laborers meeting, he gave all of us who were there, he said, henceforth, because I was Ava X, most of us were X then,
yes,
and he stood us all up and he said, your name is Muhammad. And I mean, bedlam broke out. Oh my God.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it was.
Praise be to Allah.
Say goodbye to the slave name.
Yes, sir. Okay, excellent. And I have so many questions for you, Sister Minister. So thank you for your patience, because I see the comments and I see your questions. I'm coming to them. I have a quick 2-minute commercial break for the sponsors of this episode. My brother Rashad and his business partner Jamal, Street Premiere Video Production and Editing. Thank you all for your sponsorship. If you need, they have a 4K drone. If you need any video production, please reach out to them immediately. They will assist you. My sister Miriam has a coloring book, ABC I Love Me, and a children's book. It is on Amazon. Thank you very much, Sister Miriam Muhammad. My sister Naima, Stay On Point Dance Academy, LLC. She teaches ballet virtually to young women. Thank you for your sponsorship. Supreme Men's Clothing in St. Louis, Missouri, 1035 West Florissant Avenue. The phone number is 314-528-5555. The brother's going to keep you dressed very fresh, keep you dripping. BMW Entertainment, my brother Ronald in Phoenix, Arizona, they do event planning. Reach out to them and they plan events all around the country. Brother Kenneth Muhammad, Bowtie Extraordinaire, phone number 917-337-1380. Supreme Team Tax Insurance, Brother Todd X. McGraw, phone number 803-521-2787. Our brother Chantel, Supreme Express, the X Factor in Transportation and Logistics, Houston, Texas. Keep showing love. Sister Serena Woodford in Fort Lauderdale, Designs of Composure, HollyTexture.com. Sister Shelly Muhammad, Las Vegas, Khalik's Boutique. Our brother Jason Ali, Standing on the Pentagram and Needles, A Boy's Journey from Indifference to Making a Difference, on Amazon. Thank you very much. Also, my second book, which is a children's book, Cleopatra, and 2 more sponsors. Sister Tia Muhammad, Raising Black Millionaire Flashcards. Please support her. Reach out to her on Facebook. She teaches economic empowerment and development. Last but not least, my father's book, A Soldier in the Movement of Christ, AbdulSharif.com. Thank you all very much. And we're getting back to our sister, Dr. Minister Ava Muhammad. Okay, are you there, ma'am?
I am.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you, my sister Miriam wanted to know, being a woman, did you ever receive sexism when you went into the ministry to run the mosque and then become a national spokesman?
Oh, absolutely. That's still the case.
Mm.
Remember the study guide number 12, the 4 great impediments to self-development. Racism is first, immediately followed by sexism, then nationalism, and then materialism. And all those things are alive and present. And as they begin to be pushed out by the Lord of the Worlds, you're getting pushed back. This is why George Floyd was tortured to death. A dying world of racism.
Okay, yes, ma'am. We can hear you now.
Yes, sir. And so sexism is the same way. It's very difficult for many men. A man has to be very advanced spiritually and intellectually to be able to accept a woman in a decision-making position, in a position of teaching, public speaking. I've seen a Facebook post and other things with comments, you know, what is wrong with Farrakhan, making a woman a national spokesperson. And sometimes it's subtle, you know, or it's subconscious, where people don't even know that that they are exhibiting those traits, and they don't mean to, but it's just difficult to eliminate. But all those things are going out of the world. You're not going to have freedom, justice, and equality with sexism present.
Praise be to Allah. Yes, ma'am. And what advice would you give to sisters who want to go into the ministry, following in your footsteps, and how should they overcome the obstacles when they're faced with those?
Well, you have to be yourself. I think one mistake that we make dealing with sexism is similar to the mistake a lot of Black people make dealing with racism, and that's where you try to change the racist. Okay, your job is not to help somebody stop being a sexist. Your job is to fulfill your purpose, and then you let Allah do the rest. But the more you're focused on who and what you are, that in and of itself begins to push back. And you know, this I went through this going into a male-dominated profession at that time, which is law. Yes, now you have as many women in the profession as men. There was a time when there were hardly any women in the ministry. And it's interesting, people ask me about sexism in Islam. I'm like, Islam? What about Christianity? Are you serious? You know, there's a Christian pastor in Mississippi who had the local minister there in Jackson at the time was bringing me to his church to speak. And he said he's bringing the Southern Regional Representative of Minister Farrakhan. And we were actually en route, and they were talking, and our local minister said, and such, and she, and he said, did you say she? The pastor. And he said, oh, women don't speak from our pulpit. And if you remember, Minister Farrakhan said he had a discussion with a reverend, and he said, he told the minister, I don't allow women to speak. And the minister said, well, what if Mary, the mother of Jesus, came in here? And the man said she wouldn't speak in here. Yep.
That's it. Well, praise be to God. And how? Well, speaking of you being in Atlanta, the Southern Regional Representative, how was that experience for you?
It was somewhat of a nightmare, you know. You know, and it goes back to the question about sexism. You know, when you're the so-called quote first anything,
Yes, ma'am.
you just run into tremendous opposition, and oftentimes it's from the very group that you represent. You
Mm,
know, there are a lot of women that don't want to see women advance, just like
mm,
there are a lot of Black people that can't deal with Black leadership.
mm.
And we see what Minister Farrakhan goes through.
Yes, ma'am.
What happens is freedom brings responsibility. A lot of people like to hide under being a victim,
Mm,
and it keeps them from having to be responsible for anything. You know, I can't do anything because I'm Black. I can't do anything because I'm a woman. And then when somebody stands up and they are a woman and they are Black and they're Black and a woman, then you look crazy saying that there's something holding you back.
praise be to God. Yes, ma'am. And what advice? How did you handle the sisters? I've heard. I didn't think about it from a woman's standpoint, but how did you handle the sisters who didn't want to see you, or who weren't helpful in your success?
You have to almost become myopic, like a racehorse, how they put the blinders on the racehorse
Yes,
so
ma'am.
that they're not distracted by the crowd. You know, you just treat it as noise. It's just noise on the side.
Mm,
And you know what you're there to do. And you're not even there to be there a long time. You're just there to make a statement. And it's not you, it's the person that put you there who's making the statement.
mm.
So the Quran said you don't take on what you can't handle.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, so my job was to just teach Islam, and that's what I did.
Praise be to Allah. And thank you for doing that. And also, I want to make sure we thank, on behalf of myself and my family, that we thank your husband and your children, your family, for their sacrifice as well.
Oh, praise be to Allah.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am. And thank you, Sister Tracy, for always showing love, and your great questions as well. Next
yes.
question is: have you ever faced, speaking of being a sister, a woman, a Black woman in America, and then coming to the South, did you ever fear or have a fear for your life? And have you ever received death threats? And if so, how have you overcome that?
Well, some of the most virulent, vicious death threats were recent, not from the South, but from San Diego, California.
Mm, mm, mm.
When the Jewish local leadership there had a hissy fit because San Diego State had invited me to be, or was, they didn't even invite me, Brother Joshua. They had me on a possible guest list of speakers
Mm.
to come to a conference on reparations. And you know, the point person on Project Separation for the
Yes,
nation.
ma'am.
And I had been there earlier. This is the end of 2019. I'd been there earlier in that month, I think, speaking at Cal State in Long Island. And some of the students were out. I came down to the mosque that Sunday, and some of the students from San Diego State came and they wanted to invite me. So it was myself and another activist whose name, I'm sorry, I can't recall. But
Yes,
when
ma'am.
this Jewish professor saw us on the list, he notified his group and they pressured the Black Student Union into, they didn't disinvite me, they just never finished the process. And so, you know, we were focused on Savior's Day and all of this, and then COVID came. But Student Minister Waliullah Muhammad out there in San Diego is very active and influential in the community. So I'm going to go back out there to a community event. But I got all kinds of stuff on Facebook about I hope you die. And some of the remarks were so filthy. I wouldn't even repeat them on your program, and
Yes, ma'am.
you know, that type of thing. So you know that happens because we follow a man. He is the Jesus of this time. He's the one that was prophesied, and so you know what does Jesus face? I mean, slander, defamation, death threats, and finally does go to the cross. And so any of us who are with him, you're going to encounter some negativity, but Allah makes it bounce off of you. It's so irrelevant.
Yes, ma'am.
And these people are like nobodies. When I got some of the worst statements, comments, I just went through and deleted them, and I didn't tell my husband and daughters about them till they were deleted.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I didn't want them responding.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and thank you very much for your sacrifice, and thank you all for seeing Watch People's podcast. I want to say, Sister Minister, that when you receive these death threats, like at some of your speaking engagements, could you please just send a text message to myself, and I'll make sure I bring some of the brothers who like to just, come and shake their hands with some of these people. It would be an honor just for us to have a conversation with some of these people who are talking like that.
I'd be happy to do that.
Yes, well, my next question for you is the Million Man March. So you spoke of in 1994 the suing of the New York Post. Now, leading up to the Million Man March, what was the climate, and how did the Million Man March impact you as a sister?
Oh, it was one of the most amazing events of my life. Once in a millennium type of experience. I'm a history major and was in undergrad, and I was taught, again by my parents, an idealized love of Black people. And so to see nearly 2 million Black men gather in the nation's capital when just a century before, and even leading up into the days of segregation, just 35, 40 years before that, when Black people weren't even allowed to gather in twos and threes without intrusion and assault by law enforcement, and sanction because you tried to open a business or do anything. And to witness all those brothers, 99.9% of whom were not Muslims, but they responded to the call of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, because it goes back to what I said opening this, to the question of what should the young people do.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is, correct what led to your dissatisfaction in the first place. What you're dissatisfied with is unqualified, inappropriate leadership. And so we're at the end of Satan's room, and in their soul, anybody that has a soul is searching for divinely guided leadership, and people feel that in the minister. He's characterized in the Quran, is speaking of him, is the references to Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah, through whom the revelation came at that time. Now, in the fullness of time, that one called a light-giving son is Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Yes,
he
ma'am.
literally gives light, life, and heat. And when you're within the sound of his voice, when you're in his presence, you actually feel energized.
Yes, ma'am.
You actually feel life come up in you, because it's the Spirit of God touching your spirit. And that's what the Million Man March was. I mean, people, Black people, the real people, they were down with this from day one. And it was a Black woman, Dr. Dorothy Height, who was the first Black leader of note to stand up and endorse the march. A lot of the men, they were hiding, they were scared. Oh my God, you're gonna call a crowd? Little did they know what it would be. They're thinking in the hundreds, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Or maybe a few thousand. They were scared of that. Like, you didn't get permission to do this. And it was a Black woman, Dr. Dorothy Height, who stood up publicly to back the minister. And after that, the rest started to come along.
Praise be to Allah. And Sister Minister, I think your hand might be on the microphone. It went down a little bit, just a little bit.
Oh, you know what? I think it's because the phone is resting on a notebook. It kind of slid down.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Okay, I can hear you now. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it was covering the mic.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. And thank you. And thank you all for, I see your comments. Thank you all for continuing to watch the People's Podcast. Sister Minister, the youth are being fired up and inspired by your answers. My next question for you is, speaking of that, with the woman role in the scripture of when Jesus, is taken to the cross, what do you think that represents as far as the women of today, and how can the men beat the prophecy of leaving Jesus and betraying Jesus in that dark hour?
Yes, sir. Yes, the women. I guess one of the most significant and unique things about the Jesus of the Bible and the characteristics that we should look for today, and that's how we know who Minister Farrakhan is.
Yes, ma'am.
Is you look for a man whose life has been profoundly impacted by females, and whose ministry impacts and liberates women. You know, everything from his appointment of me as a national spokesperson to the Muslim girl training and development class and general civilization class that was created by God himself, Master Fard Muhammad, and developed by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Where else do you find the exaltation of the female? Where else do you find the true teachings that the female is not from the rib of a man, she's from the mind of God, the self-created God.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
That preceded her in existence. He was alone. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said he was searching.
Than himself, but one to whom he could reproduce himself. And from himself, he brought forth a different being that he called woman. And in her, he placed the secret of his self-creation, and he placed the power to recreate in the womb, a womb man.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So there's no other place to get that truth than the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so, yes, it is the woman. The woman is created to comfort, to console, to back, to support the man. That's why women were at the cross. It is the nature in which we are created.
Yes, ma'am.
And the way for the men to pass the test this time is to have a proper self-perspective. It doesn't lessen your manhood to obey another man. If that man is the voice of God speaking to you, you are a God, but you're not the God.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
The Lord of the worlds is addressing you and leading you to the maximum manifestation of your great self. But you have to submit. And it's through the woman that you learn how to submit. John, who was the only one at the cross.
Yes, ma'am.
And if you look at his gospel, the book of John, it's really the only one that addresses the divinity of Jesus.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Are more like biographical. They more like sort of catalog and recite the events of Jesus' life.
Yes, ma'am.
In the book of John that it says, in the beginning was the Word.
Yes, ma'am.
And the Word was with God. And the Word was God.
Yes, ma'am.
And the Word became flesh and dwelt among men.
Yes, ma'am.
John saw the divinity in his cousin, Jesus.
Yes, ma'am.
And he described him from that way. So John, it's not like there's only going to be one brother, okay, that makes it. John is a type. Just like all of these Marys around Jesus, they are types. So there could be any number of us, we pray Allah, that make it because we fulfill that capability as our beloved, dear, priceless brother, Minister Jabril Muhammad, in his writings in the Final Call newspaper, he always is connecting Master Fard Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Minister Louis Farrakhan, and helping us, which is not easy.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
not easy to see the humanity and divinity in the same person.
Yes, ma'am.
Either you're God and you're perfect, or you're just some dude.
Yes, ma'am.
We go from one extreme to the other.
Yes, ma'am.
But anyway, I'm going to have to begin to wrap up. My phone is ringing because I got a conference call coming up.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Can you take 2 more questions for us, please?
I sure can.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, well, now I got it. I want to know this because I think people should know, speaking of divinity and being, the 2 extremes, what do you do for fun just to minister?
Well, my husband and I, before COVID,
Yes, ma'am.
we used to love to go to the movies, okay? Every kind of movie imaginable. We love travel. Obviously, I travel a lot on speaking engagements, but we love to go to places where our people are found, like the Caribbean and the South Pacific and
Yes, ma'am.
Africa and these places. But we also enjoy the urban Black person that you'd find in London and in Paris. And we've been to every major city in the States and mid-major cities around the globe. And again, this is what happens when you follow Minister Louis Farrakhan. You travel, and that's another indicator of the Jesus. Jesus didn't just build some big church and sit in it. He moved about the landscape.
Yes, ma'am.
We like sports to escape. I'm a fan of not the NFL, but the players in the NFL.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, the brothers. I love a Black quarterback. I love the wide receivers. I love the athleticism and the intellect and the outspoken brothers, like a Colin Kaepernick.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And of course, now that we are the parents of grandchildren, we got a 4-year-old and 3-year-old, we're starting the cycle again. Crazy. So everything we introduced our daughters to, we want to introduce the 2 are Sasha's children, my oldest daughter.
Yes, ma'am.
As I said, Sherelle is focusing on her degree.
Yes,
but Sherelle, Sasha blessed us with a little boy and a little girl who are just incredible. And they too love the minister. Whenever Amir, my grandson, we have this big picture of the minister in here in the living room. He says, "I told you, Mimi, I want to see him again." And I said, "Okay, you got it." But those are some of the things we enjoy.
I just have one more question. Before, now I wanted to speak about real love because so many people had relationship questions, so we would have to try to come back for a part 2, inshallah.
Oh, but, please. Yes, sir.
But when speaking on Jesus and this Mary Magdalene, because you said it represents a type of woman, what advice would you give to the sisters who may be hard on themselves, who have had a different past, and brothers who may have been hard on themselves as well, based off their past, but like Mary Magdalene in the end was with Jesus? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, well, coming into Islam, you're born again. That's the divine reset button. And the book says the former shall not be remembered, nor shall it come to mind. We get in the hereafter. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said nothing of this world is going to bother us in the hereafter.
Praise be to Allah.
We will actually record, Brother Joshua. We'll keep a record that yes, Yaqub made these people, and they dominated for 6,000 years, but the details will be lost. The horror and the memory of it will over generations be purged from us. So there will be no memory of it. And it's the same thing with our sins. That's what's meant by Jesus washing away our sins. That when you come into this knowledge, long as you're found striving to do better and be better. And Mary Magdalene, the Christian scholars say she was a prostitute. That's not in the Bible. In fact, when you read her history, she was actually she came from a well-off family, and so she had her own money. She was also a businesswoman. And it was not common in those days for a woman to not have a husband. she did not have a husband. So they cast aspersions on her. The Black woman today, you know, a lot of our sisters don't have a husband.
Yes,
they
ma'am.
got to make their own way.
Yes, ma'am.
The name Mary in Hebrew actually means bitter. Bitter. This bitter Black woman. You remember that movie, Tyler Perry, Diary of a Mad Black Woman?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm familiar.
I mean, you know, the Black woman goes through it. Oh my God, that's another 9 or 10 shows.
Yes, ma'am.
Talk
Yes,
about
ma'am.
what we have been through.
Yes, ma'am.
But we're coming up out of that. And so that's for the Black man and the Black woman. And I would just leave with this: the number one thing we need to be about is restoring love and affection toward each other.
Yes, ma'am.
Because without a Black man and woman in union, there's no Black family. No Black family, no Black community. No Black community, no Black nation, no nothing. So we have to learn how to make the proper choice in a mate. It's not all you should get somebody you can look at and love. We're taught.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's attractive to you, not
Yes,
your friends, to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But bigger than that is what are your goals as a person and as part of a nation? The young people coming up now, you are the builders of the new nation. We cleared the way for you. So you respect us because we got a lot of crap out of your way.
Praise be to Allah. Yes, ma'am.
Back 460 years, please. Okay, so every generation has this trial. Look at what the young people going through now. Couldn't even have a graduation.
Yes,
things
ma'am.
like that. This virus allegedly running around, and now to watch a man tortured to death in front of the world, and now we're seeing the exposure of the United States that in Fall of America, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said would happen. He told America, you will be exposed to the world and the world will lose respect for you. And nobody's scared of America anymore because you showed yourself with this virus, you're the third world country. Because you don't even have a health care system. And that's why you told everybody to stay in the house, because you couldn't deal with it.
Praise be to Allah. Well, I want to thank you, Sister Minister Dr. Ava Muhammad. Thank you all for watching the People's Podcast. This has been extremely humbled and honored for the sponsors, Cash App, the People's Podcast, and we will promote your business. Sister Minister Ava, I just want to thank you again. And inshallah, we'll bring you back for a part 2 because we have to discuss your book, Real Love. So yes.
In the meantime, you can visit ministerava.com. Ministerava.com. Real Love is available, both the hard copy and the digital, as well as the book Naturally Beautiful, which talks about, A New Way of Life is there, which is a book I did during my days as the Southern Regional Minister. And we're about to repost Naturally Beautiful, which talks about Mary Magdalene and the Marys around Jesus, because Mary was actually a minister. She was a minister under Jesus. And she was actually, she is the first apostle. She's the apostle to the apostles because it was Mary of Magdalene whom Jesus sent to the disciples to tell them of his resurrection. Because they were sitting in the room crying, and she went to the gravesite and witnessed the resurrection.
Allahu Akbar.
ministerava.com. So thank you, Brother Joshua.
Thank you, ma'am.
My love to your beautiful family and to you, and keep up this great work. You do a wonderful program.
Praise be to Allah. You do the same. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.